Okay, let's call the meeting to order of the Design Review Subcommittee meeting of Subcommittee Wednesday, January 12th, 2022 meeting. We have no minutes to approve. Architectural review of the following items. Item 2, none. New business done, and we have old business, 2022-2023 draft guidelines for outdoor dining. Jonathan Lightfoot is the staff member that's putting the presentation and all together. He is not here now yet. We expect him soon. We don't show any roll call, but currently Commissioner McCann's here, and we're waiting for Commissioner Camp and myself is here. So, Adam, would you like to start the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair Crandall. Adam McCamian, Deputy Community Development Director. So at the last Design Review Subcommittee meeting, December 15th, 2021, the Design Review Subcommittee was presented with, call them some options for design criteria and considerations in our a forthcoming proposal for a parklet program. And at that meeting, staff which was nice because it was attended by some members of the public, and we were able to get some feedback from interested members and business owners. We had discussed a number of design features, and we essentially left it with having Jonathan come back, provide what I'll call more of a menu option of design considerations, and at the same time we had a discussion with the Design Review Subcommittee members about eliciting additional feedback prior to this meeting, which we would still welcome any additional considerations after the meeting. What I can do is we can start going through the design guidelines. However, I'd rather Jonathan go over most of that. If there's if the subcommittee members have specific comments or thoughts that they would like to provide at this time, I would be more than happy to record those for Jonathan's information after the meeting.
Okay, Scott, do you have any comments that you would like to make at the moment?
I do have some comments. Generally, I thought the whole thing was excellent, to be honest. There's Jonathan now.
Since Jonathan is here, if we could just grab you for 1 second, I know we're going to grab some stuff. I've just generally covered the item. We do have some comments from the Design Review Subcommittee members, but would you prefer just to take a 5-minute break, let you get your stuff, and then have you run through the
I have a presentation. So yeah, I'd like to do that if we can. And are you on your profile for the login?
I am, and I can get out.
So I'm just going to drop it into the shared planning or the shared presentations folder, and we'll pull it from there.
Perfect.
And go from that.
Okay.
So, apologize for my tardiness, and I'll be right back.
We will take a small pause until Jonathan's ready. We're going to call the meeting of the Design Review Subcommittee once again open at 4:14. Jonathan, you have a presentation to do, but the member representing the Downtown Business Association had some questions and is on a tight schedule, so if he wants to ask his questions before your presentation, then you won't have to rush it.
Definitely, I think that's a good idea.
Thanks. Thank you for that. Just as I read it, Jonathan, just a couple of questions that you may have answered me or not. One, assuming they go with the planters, which obviously is a great safety element, and which I think is very similar to the ones in Del Mar anyways, right? Will those be provided by the city?
That's a good
Oh,
question.
again, I don't actually have the answers
Yeah.
to this. I'm just curious.
I don't have a full answer yet. That's
Okay.
something that certainly could be a discussion with the council later on if they want to allocate funding. I did include actually in this presentation a couple of examples that include the funding, the cost ranges. So I think that we need to be aware of that as a part of the design requests from the city to the businesses, what that would entail. But I think the starting assumption would be that the businesses cover that cost. The exception would be if council at their discussion in March, give direction to staff to incorporate that into the budget discussions.
Okay. You know what the other one was? I know when we did it before, like even in our place, a lot of them have those, we've had those poles, and then I see here it's kind of discouraged to do, I guess what you call
Propane heaters?
string light. No, the string light.
Oh,
And I see, like, 'cause I know, and so I'm just curious, is that the thought process? Is that like a distraction thing? Or is that, I was just curious about the overhead string lighting. That was my last question.
Sure. Yeah, that came up in our discussion potentially after you had stepped out at the first meeting, and there's a recognition of a need for lighting, but a desire to consolidate and reduce any overhead elements as much as possible. So reducing the number of umbrellas, heaters, and hopefully avoiding as many vertical elements as possible. Some of that comes back to the comments of the interaction of the two businesses that have been discussed in the past with Brussels and Mickey's, and what are some even line standards to reduce how much goes up in the air. So that was the initial direction. Again, these are draft guidelines, so there can be ongoing discussion, but that reflects what the committee had.
Yeah, my only comment is, as you work through this process, is that Del Mar and all of this is just so dark, and I know that's at some point. So maybe this to keep on, putting that in a conversation that the areas could be well lit, which I think also is frankly a good. I mean, not that we lit anyways for other elements, but it's also a safety element too. So I'm just thinking like that the lighting's appropriate, whether it's overhead or some other way. That's
Definitely.
It. So
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. And I do have a couple of recommendations that didn't make it into the draft guidelines, but did make it into the report as a visual of maybe a substitute alternative on that topic.
Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan.
Okay, so on the screen here, we're looking at, and I'll make this available on the city website for anyone that's interested, a presentation on parklets for dining. The formal minutes were not ready, but I threw up some draft minutes here where I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just touching on some of the points that we had talked about before. Just a couple highlights from this list. The committee mentioned that new guidelines for parklets present an opportunity to create a consistent street scene and rhythm. So the draft guidelines and this presentation discuss a buffer zone and what that could look like and what elements could come within that space. The committee recommended consistent materials for barricades at the edge of decks, and that there does, even if there is a buffer zone, that there still is an edge to the decks to prevent people, animals, etc. from wandering into the street. The deck should be flush with the curb, but there should be no more than 2 consecutive decks placed side by side to allow for access to parking and other uses such as service and retail, and that roof and overhead elements should be discouraged. That's not a comprehensive list, but just a few of the notes. This goes on, and I highlighted just a couple of terms that popped out from our discussion the first round, that any lighting should be dark sky friendly, and that there was a preference for floodlights or low level lighting directed downward as opposed to string lighting. That lighting should be at a temperature range of 350 or 3,500 Kelvin, and with shade that we should look at limiting that to 3 umbrellas, heaters to 2 heaters, and a variety of other recommendations. And some of these are incorporated in the following slides where there's more visuals. So I'm going to move into the visuals. And of course, the attachment 1 had the draft guidelines within the report. So I pulled a few of the visuals from those draft guidelines so that we could all be looking at them at the same time. And as we go through these slides now, I'm happy to stop at each slide and discuss as we go along. So please feel free to chime in with comments or questions. So this is just a quick representation of the standard rhythm with buffer zone. The committee had recommended a 14-foot distance from the curb with a buffer zone of 3 to 4 feet and a 2-foot separation from parking stripes. So that would be to either side to protect cars that park adjacent to the deck so that they still have room to open their door. And then finally, a 30-inch concrete planter. So this is just a quick representation of what that would look like in a block format. Any thoughts before we move on from this slide?
Only that it could be reduced in number by using rectangular planters.
Okay.
And I'm not opposed to the look of either of them, but the rectangular planters are 4 to 5 feet long. The price is reasonable. They are rated for traffic safety. And we do want to keep them low because where you see the 2-foot dimension down there on the bottom, people backing out, we want to make sure they can see the traffic as they go around the corner. So if we're going to have anything tall, it would want to be on the center planters, but not on the ends.
And I was thinking where I referenced the 30 inches, there's a balance to find there where also I do know that like the outlets, for instance, had some issues with bollards that people would run over because they weren't tall enough for people to see. So finding that balance of...
yeah, we got to keep these out and pulled in, well, maybe pulled in from the side a little bit, but yes,
Okay.
we have to be aware of that.
Any other comments before I move to the
I
next?
like in the text it talks about reflective tape on those protective planters. I really like that too.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, again, to prevent any damage to vehicles that people are able to...
That's just an example
okay.
of the rectangular ones.
Oh, there we go, scroll up.
It's a street scene picture.
Oh, I see, okay, great.
It shows the round ones in front, but then the rectangular ones.
Great, okay. Thank you. So we'll move to the next slide. So this...
Jonathan, I
Yeah, go
apologize.
ahead.
Can you go back to that last slide? So, in speaking about line of sight, are we anticipating these decks to be 6 inches or so above the concrete?
Correct.
And then some type of guardrail around it?
Correct.
I don't know if Public Works has weighed in on this, either before or after, but is there any appetite for an area like the corners of the lots in Marblehead Coastal, where there's that
Little cutoff?
in that
It's not a bad idea.
in that corner,
Certainly not a
nothing
bad
can
idea.
be taller than a certain, because you can still have a guardrail, and then you could have a table or a high top, and then you've got people sitting there, and now you've got an obstruction for the vehicles trying to back out here that's caused by basically people just being in that area.
And one thing that doesn't really show here is there is a 4-foot, that deck is 4 foot in from the end of the parking space. So here it looks like it's almost the same depth as the parking space,
Yeah.
but it's really pulled in.
Yeah, I just,
So a
it's
lot
just
of
one of those
scale there.
things, we should, I assume Public Works will be getting in on this early on, but it would be nice to ensure that we're not,
Yeah, line of sight of cutting out of that first parking space below is important.
Good comment, thank you. I hear your recommendation to also look at rectangular, so
Sure.
absolutely we'll look into that. This is just a quick review of a few of the options that I found online to give a sense of dimensions, pricing, and then finishes. And I think at least on the finishes, that's going to be consistent regardless of the shape of the planter, so maybe we can spend some time on that. But the range here is 280 to up to 500 depending on the size, and given the spacing we probably would be looking at 4 to 5 of these per deck, and so that puts us in a range of 1,200 to 2,500 of additional expenses to the businesses. So just putting that out there so people are aware of what that entails.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please do.
What I'm about to say, I don't know, to me sounds a little stupid, but it's something maybe to think about, which is, if we spec'd out, because this whole thing is temporary, right? I mean, 2 years is gonna come and go, and then they're gone, but maybe if they were all uniform, and maybe the city might want them, or be able to use them after, so especially if they were all the same color, like, and or something that the city would want, maybe the city would or could buy them from the business owners at the end, and they could use them as in parks or wherever they might need them. So I'm not prejudging, I have no idea where, but if there was a possible reuse rather than just throwing them away at the end, and if we were to, if that was a consideration, it would be good if they were all the same color and uniform. So it's spec'd out, it's this model number, this color. But that way they could potentially be reused later.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. I would work Beaches, Parks, and Recreation most likely on that specific.
Right.
Are there reuse possibilities? And potentially one of the things we could consider too is even a cost sharing. Right, where the businesses agree to pay for half of the cost, but then the city owns
Gets them at the end.
the material afterwards. So definitely something.
It might be a hard battle since this is no longer, or at least currently, not an emergency ordinance trying to keep them in business because they lost indoor dining. And I'd say, yeah, maybe the city would want to invest in that. But when this is over and above and just a benefit to the businesses, I don't know if there's going to be a stomach to spend much money from the city side.
But there might be a use for those rather than just all throwing them in the trash in 2 years.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I think
And I know the city's not going to want to store them.
Well, only if they could use them. That's
if there's a use. So probably how we would handle that piece would be through the license agreements. So when we sign, so I think the best route for us moving forward is for design review to say this is what we'd like to see, and then we would navigate. More the council would comment on the license agreement portion of like what's the financial balance and landing place. So of the ones on, so I hear the rectangular notion. Is there any interest in rounded options, or rounded on the ends and one longer rectangular in the center?
Quite possibly. I'd like to get the full count commission's input on that, and be careful that we don't specify something that can only come from one manufacturer.
Sure.
It's got to be generic.
And if and I'll just throw this in there as well. Is there any consideration about the impact to square footage of the decks based on round versus rectangular?
It's not on everything's being held 4 feet back for safety, and these are going to go in that 4-foot strip between the street lane and the start of the deck.
There's a limitation on how big the decks would get anyways.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I rewind real quick. Sorry, wrong button. Right now, so straight out from the curb to the edge of the parking stall, and I haven't walked this in person, but you do the measurement online, it's 17 feet. So right now there's a 3-foot buffer, which would work for all of these except for that 48 by 30, that's 30 inches tall. Its width is the first dimension, so that's a 4-foot. So then in this scenario, we would need to reduce the 14-foot deck to a 13-foot deck, and then it's a 4-foot. So this 4-foot planter, that's the third one here, would sit against the edge of the deck, and then the outer portion would be essentially in line with the edge of the parking stripes that exist currently.
Can we talk about this for a second?
Sure.
I don't want to sound overly anal about it. For what it's worth, my preference, I think, from a space efficiency and look, is the rectangular. But I agree the whole commission should weigh in on it. Regarding the 4-foot buffer space, 4 feet is, the only safety provided really is the concrete barrier. The 4 feet could be 15 feet. A wayward car is getting there through space. It's just the concrete buffer. So, if you know, like, I would think if we had 4 feet, let's say that the planters boxes were 2 feet wide, you would maybe want to have that, of the 4 feet, have the 2 foot not right up against the travel lane, give the cars a little bit more space to maneuver down Del Mar. But,
Although the cars are sticking out that far.
okay, so then if that's the case, let's say the planter's 2 feet wide, why do we not just have a 2 foot protective barrier? What's the benefit of the extra non-protective barrier space? Because it's just air.
Exactly, and that's what I think is gonna make it nice.
Okay, so it's more of a,
We don't wanna crowd the street so much with railing and tables and whatnot.
okay,
The users are gonna be quite happy not being jammed up against the traffic and
okay.
smelling the exhaust.
Okay, so it's more, so that's not a safety issue, that's a livability issue or whatever, pleasurability, okay, and I agree with that.
And with the character of the downtown business area, we're trying to also meet all our design guideline standards too at the same time.
Is there an aspect of safety for the 4 feet?
Yes, absolutely. These are
No, I
actually.
mean, like, from a public works perspective, is that something that they came up with?
No, that wasn't a Public Works initiated comment. The comment was that we leave a buffer zone with room for traffic rated material of some sort, whether that's bollards or planters.
So where did the 4 foot?
That was an
setback-
initial committee
And
recommendation.
the fact that we don't need to make them, 14 foot is good size for the patio for dining. That gives them
Oh,
two
no,
good
absolutely.
rows of.
I was just thinking that if it was a traffic safety concern, that the issue could be brought up by the planning commission acting as the traffic
That's
commission.
correct. That's correct.
So if it was a staff thing, I wanted to make sure that our
And
our
we did
members were
read
aware
it
that-
in all the different examples, the New York examples of their street, they talk about that. So we didn't pull this out of the air, that they wanted to have a positive separation between the cars and the dining. You know, when there's a drive lane next to a curb, you don't have that. And people are walking on it, but they aren't sitting there still at a dining table, not even being able to dodge anything. But,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I just want to make sure that all considerations, we're
Good. Absolutely.
taking into account.
So before we move on from this one, I do think that this is still useful to jump onto the right image there of what realm of option the design review board would be comfortable with, or if there's a preference on.
Of the colors, the ones that are probably the two right ones, the slight little tinge of terracotta to it on that 48 by 30 would be probably sand or some color like that. Let's see here.
You got,
Let's
it goes
see.
from left to right on the very top. Or are you talking on the very top?
Yeah,
So-
no, I was looking at the two
Exposed air view.
pots on the,
Oh,
So-
he was looking at the round pots at the
yeah.
bottom.
Those samples are so small.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the samples are white, buff, sand, gray, brick red, brown, and charcoal. And then it's more of like what's the finish, so acid wash, weatherstone, exposed rock. So maybe we could start with that. Is there a preference with the finish, acid, weatherstone, or exposed rock?
Probably not exposed rock, but
I would agree with that.
but the sand, I think the acid wash is fine.
That's what I like.
And I'm looking at buff and sand as being two decent colors, which I think are the two right pots.
These two here.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it was, the lighter it would be, the more visible it would be for drivers or whatever, I would think.
Yeah, and they'll also have plant material, which will add color as well to,
But I'm thinking of at night,
at night.
yeah.
And at night, I think the intent again is the reflective strip will be
Got
the
it.
primary thing.
And also if we can get a low intensity, just solar garden landscape light stuck in there that will give a glow to the planting, that would be wonderful. I mean, it doesn't have to be bright to distract people or try to light the patio. It'd just be a low glow, and those are like $12 a piece or
Yeah.
something like that.
Reasonable. Okay, so my takeaway from this is standard acid wash and colors in the tan range.
Yeah, which is right out of design guidelines.
Preferred. Okay, so then this is off the wall, a later introduction, but something that I thought may be worth consideration. We did have, especially like during the pandemic, but it's been more widely adopted, people who are biking to downtown. This is also traffic rated and could be a consideration at the edge as well. It does change the aesthetic, right? Plants versus bikes that are parked, but does also maybe contribute to the offsetting of the lost parking spaces in a way. So I wanted to just put that in front of you and see if there was any interest in any
Well, we've already
discussion of
got a designed bike rack that's being used downtown.
that. We do.
And I don't know if we want to, I can't believe that's cheap.
It's a little more, one of those is a little more expensive than this would be.
So I don't know if we want to put a new element in there that's unique to just these, particularly when it's temporary.
Okay.
That's my thought.
I'm not, it's a good idea, it's a creative idea, I'm not really a fan, because
Okay.
it doesn't provide much barrier, and then especially then if you are like have chaining up bikes to it alongside the traffic lane and alongside the diners, I just don't think has the same separation that
Sure.
we're looking for.
It's a good thought, though.
Okay.
If we were starting from scratch, I would say that would be something to consider.
Sure.
And I will say, Chair Crandall's discussion about consistency being mattering is very astute. We do have some planters that are already there. They're this color and they're around the intersection of Del Mar and Bula Vista. There are trash cans in the same area that are just
Is that
terracotta.
acid wash or is that?
This is an acid wash.
Okay, great.
But we've got a number of, I'll call them bowl type features on the street. Maybe staff can do a survey of what's there so that when the final iteration of this comes in, we're not, one or two variations is great, but if we have 15 different, if it looks like a materials, a construction materials storage yard on Del Mar.
Now, is there any place that maybe a patio's going to go where those would be not necessary and they could move out? So if we did match them,
Yeah, I don't think that
Probably
these
not.
would
It's
be right
just on
next
that
to.
corner.
Yeah, but it's just your discussion about consistency. It's very astute, and I just want to make sure that we're providing the commission with a
Thank you.
the full understanding of what additional features are going to do to the already existing aesthetics.
And if I could, I've gotten some feedback in the past when we had this program in the first place about potentially even removing those from the sidewalk just to free more space on the sidewalk. So as to the discussion of cost sharing, potentially we can find a close match to those. And maybe something that the DBA could even consider is like a less expensive replacement on sidewalk where we don't necessarily need like the traffic rated element at those corners, and then use those on the street. So that could be one
I think we can have that discussion. That's
consideration.
That's a good one.
Okay, so let's move to the next one. This is placed in hold, and I'll have an update for you for Planning Commission. Pat Murphy has volunteered to create some imagery and at no cost to us, so thanks to Pat Murphy, but I don't have that visual yet, so I'll have that for
Wonderful.
For the Planning Commission.
Wonderful.
So then I had some images. We discussed this a little bit before. I wanted to grab, this was one of the comments from Julie before. This is Laguna Beach, where she mentioned the louvered wood look, and you can see that they do have a reflective edge here. They don't have a protective edge, but they did have the reflective element. Avila's, this was their later version. Initially, they were just on street. They did build a deck later on.
Mm-hmm.
This does have the solid wall, which initially we were, the comments were not favorable towards. Same would go for, this was Nick's. Their patio area was also solid. Then we have the louvered version. This was Pronto Italian Deli that had small slats in there. So I'd starred these two as being ones that would fit the what I was hearing from the first meeting. Does that sound correct? And are there any additional comments?
I think in your report you also talked about iron vertical picket. Honestly, the upper right one of those is aesthetically the most pleasing to me, and doesn't reek of temporary.
Mm-hmm.
So without designing it, I think that's certainly going in the right direction. I'm thinking that
What are those empty spaces? Is there like plexiglass or like iron
I think
pickets?
it's just
I believe it's just open, so there's a railing that crosses the top.
Okay. But a kid could run out.
You could have something could fall off and into the street, unless you're more. I don't recall from being in person.
I don't remember. I think Julie took those. I don't remember what those are. Like what those. Yeah. It's good.
Something to
It's
fix
pretty
Jonathan
slick.
before his railings is misspelled.
Thank you. Missing an eye.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you guys. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. I was trying to see, design guidelines, and their existing outdoor dining. Okay, but here's another reason for that 4 foot we talked about being a safety thing. This is the the existing outdoor dining ordinance. And they talk about a 6 foot from drive aisle or whatnot. And we were kind of saying, okay, well, this is a special situation, maybe 4 is okay. But I think,
Nope. I like it.
so trying to keep consistent with this as well as what, are you familiar with that one?
I mean, I've read through the code, but I'm not.
It says setback from alley streets and whatnot.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. So we're in conformance, but not necessarily with the dimension that's identified there, but with
Gotcha.
the,
And it gives the approving body the ability to reduce.
exactly.
Okay.
This is
Good
the
to know.
outdoor dining ordinance that we currently have. And
So one other thing on this immediate visual, I wanted to get your opinions on. We talked about colors more in regards to umbrellas. We did have a couple. Obviously, they painted this deck gray. This deck was painted green. For the wood elements, is there an opinion? I mentioned
Yeah.
brown or stain in the draft guidelines, but
in Lenny's guidelines, I don't know if he states it this way, but I think he's talking all earth tones. And to be consistent with that, I think, and if you can just check how it's stated, I don't think they all have to be identical. I mean, we don't require, yes, we require everything to be Spanish colonial Novarro stucco. But trim colors and all, he's got a number of colors, and I think if we go with what's in the guidelines, we're safe.
okay.
And if one's a little different, I think a little variety is not going to hurt
Okay.
as far as that's concerned, particularly if it's tied together with the pots that are pretty uniform.
Okay.
So I think you just answered my question. My question was going to be, are we picking one design style and then they all do that? Or no, there's multiples. Like some guys could have the spaced slats, some guys could have the louvereds. But it sounds like, Bart, you're in favor of allowing some variety.
A little variety, but mainly in colors and all. We've got these bulb outs and these little sitting areas that are all identical in style and whatnot. So we've got kind of a common street theme going. And I would certainly be comfortable with one style, but maybe allowing colors to change a little, within reason.
Okay.
We're not trying to create a fiesta look where we've got bright colors.
Oranges
over
and
the
reds
place.
and yellows and
And we're gonna get that with the umbrellas. We're gonna get different colors and whatnot. It would certainly be easy for the businesses if we went all
One
style.
Design.
structural design.
I mean, then if one contractor's, hey, I'll do everybody's and give everybody a discount rather than each guy having to have his own little contractor come in and do it. But we're gonna have to, I mean, that looks pretty nice because it has some style to it. Now, if at each one of those openings you had one of the planters in front of it, it might look real nice.
Well,
I mean, that could be closed off at that point then.
Yeah, I think it needs to be closed off for safety purposes, so some toddler doesn't sneak out. So maybe it's black iron pickets or clear plexiglass or something, but I just think there needs to be a barrier in there to prevent wayward kids, give parents some.
Yeah, I think openings, that is definitely problematic. But the rhythm you've got going
Yeah,
would be,
planter,
Planting.
louver, planter, louver.
and it doesn't have to be louver, I mean, I kind of am growing fond of that horizontal look, although it's not the typical thing we see with the pickets.
You're talking about the green?
No, I'm talking about the louver.
The louver.
These other ones, that's the cheapest way to go, and in a year those are to be bowed because they aren't supported for what, 6-8 feet. It's not going to last. And the solid rail that's over there at the left, was that plastered or is that just painted plywood?
I believe that they actually had a barricade underneath and they covered the barricade
Oh,
with
so-
wood. So this one actually was like
K-rail?
traffic rated, yeah. So they covered K-rails with wood.
Okay, and you can see the lighting. That's why we didn't want the lighting. I mean, looks like the circus came to town, the bulb lighting above. Now, I don't know, but they did it with, I don't know how they lit that one on the upper right.
There's certainly a lot of, maybe just ambient light from other things. It looks well illuminated.
It does look well illuminated.
We got all those tree lights in the trees also.
Yeah, I do see some version of string lighting, but I don't know
I
if
think
that's
that's
under
under
the
the eave,
business's eve exactly.
But,
Yeah,
that's
they've
what
got
we're
some
going for.
interesting lighting.
and I've hesitated doing any. I'd love to see us have the city council say, hey, let's get an architect who will hire on and spend or get the Downtown Business Association to take and put their name on a design, do this.
Let me reach out to Michael and see if anyone from the guild would be interested.
Yeah, I think we get some great ideas and,
'Cause I do think that I mean it removes the flexibility, but at the same time it makes it here's your cutout, like here's your template,
yeah.
and build and run, and then your umbrellas can be differentiated and your coloring can have some differentiation. Obviously your furniture.
And I don't know, what do you feel about if we're trying to get I don't want to say generic, but
Uniform.
a uniform, thank you. With the umbrellas, do we want to say just colored umbrellas with no signage, or are we going to allow signage to be on those things, Corona or Tecate, whatever? I don't know how that would look with our sign ordinance.
Well, I mean, technically, it would have to comply with the sign ordinance, unless specific sign regulations are part of this. And I will say, we can regulate the time, place, and manner of signs in the public right-of-way. So that's absolutely something the planning commission can
We might
approve
consider that
or
and ask that question.
or say no to.
Um,
And I'm just, before we get off the topic of
Sure.
uniformity, one other resource that we have is our city's landscape architect, Pat Murphy.
They do patios.
They do a lot.
Rec areas.
Outdoor
absolutely.
areas, and if the committee and subsequent planning commission review indicates that this is a great opportunity for additional landscaping, I think having a landscape architect
Yeah.
put eyes on it.
They are outdoor recreation dining areas, and that's what the landscape architects do. So
Mm-hmm.
he'd be a great resource.
And I don't know if so he's already going to get me a landscape palette and some drawings, but I can definitely reach out and we could I'm sure that we could even pull some budget for if he would be able to do the
Well,
spec.
I wouldn't be surprised if he
drawings.
doesn't have some of this in his drawer.
Yeah, okay. Good comment.
Nobody puts things in drawers anymore. On a disc. On a disc.
Yeah. Well, nobody can figure out how to print it.
Yeah. But that would be great. And he's used to landscape walls and fences and railings. He'd be an excellent resource.
Sounds good. On the sign topic, just briefly, within the draft guidelines, the only sign that I included as an option was a menu sign, which I think has some value but it would be more on the pedestrian side, on the sidewalk side. Whereas you come up to a deck, you'd be able to see this is the business name and here's their menu.
I do think they're going to have to be able to say this is our patio, not our next door neighbors. And
but that was, as of now, that's the only thing that I've included as an allowed sign type, and I think I put 2 foot by 2 foot as the permitted space for that sign.
Okay.
And my thinking there too, again, to free up the sidewalk is an ask to not do that as a sandwich board sign, but as something that I know that we're trying to not have a bunch of vertical elements, but I think maybe even like a standardized corner where they physically attach the menu board at the corner.
Wouldn't they probably have a menu attached to the establishment right across on the other side of the sidewalk?
So some of them do. Actually, a lot of them do, and like the seller
some
does.
do,
Brussels
most of them are
Bistro.
not even giving out menus anymore. They're using the QR code. And,
So I'm
but
not
I do like the idea of identifying this is
HH
El
Commons.
Ranchito's patio, self-seating, whatever they want. Something like that. It needs to be, it's temporary, probably meet the same thing as directional signs. It would be the equivalent of directional sign. I was thinking, Scott, do you remember the ice cream
Handles?
establishment? Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a discussion on their umbrellas and the colors, and they were talking about putting their name on the umbrella,
Right.
and I think we nixed that.
I think so. I think we let them do their colors. I remember they kind of had a really bright striped color scheme.
Yeah, and we toned it back a little bit, but not to their detriment.
We said no striping on the awnings, so we gave them more strict. Awnings need to be solid color and not bright.
But
And
then
then
they could do the umbrellas what they
you
So I
want.
want to
gave
be
them-
consistent with what we did there. Just
So you did give them more flexibility with umbrellas because they weren't permanent.
okay. So look back if you can and just see what we said on that. I think that's probably the same direction we should
It's fine.
do here.
Yeah.
And there's a slide coming up that'll be good for umbrellas before we get there. Furniture, I don't, do you care to regulate specifically the type of furniture? It's not something that's really visible from the street side, but if we do, those are my quick take thoughts of options from one of the websites.
How does resin differ from vinyl and plastic?
So resin is a little thicker. I'd almost say it's texture-wise is pretty similar to like the polywood. You'd mentioned the wood composite before. So it's heavier.
Okay.
This is temporary.
I also find it to be more comfortable, which is why
Well, I'm just wondering how it's going to distinguish, because I know it said no plastic and vinyl
sure.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we care, or have we ever cared? Well, yes, we can. That downtown is trying to be the late 20s. That whatever furniture is used has to be something that could have been available at that time, which obviously steel was, tubing and stuff, wood, but plastic wasn't a big deal then, and maybe the design shouldn't be too crazy, but or is that going too far?
I don't see wood up there for one.
Yeah. I think some of that is that, so this was one of the largest providers, and when you go to outdoor seating and tables, they don't include wood, partially because it deteriorates faster outdoors. So,
El Ranchito talked about they took their stuff from inside out.
They did. They also have said, I don't know if you mentioned, that some of the tables were thrashed from that period of being
absolutely.
out there.
But they've got the stuff in back.
Yeah.
I
think it can be on the table.
Do we care that much about the furniture that's inside their enclosed parklet?
No.
So should we just leave this as a
Up to them?
recommendation, but up to the applicant?
Well, you've got the prohibited items, plastic and vinyl.
Sure.
Yeah, I would think let them
And,
find their own.
And I would, within the plastic,
I think you should maybe just put a verbiage something like furniture shall be in character or be compatible with the patio design. Talk about vague. We don't have to worry about wind because they aren't leaving it out at night. Although some were talking about that, weren't they?
a lot of the businesses do leave them out at night. They tie them together, but they don't go back indoors.
Maybe this is the one place they get to be a little unique for their own business. I know what I'd pick if I had the business, but I don't know if I feel like you have to dictate to them what furniture.
There's a lot of furniture options out there, and if there's certain things that you want to prohibit, I'd say just prohibit that and give them flexibility to do what they want.
I'm on.
Let them try and source at their cost effectiveness and.
Yeah, I'm in line with you because they may have their restaurant supplier that they use has a product that they can get at a discount because that's who they buy everything else from.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Lighting. Well, this is actually heating and lighting. Oh no, there's a separate side for lighting. So lighting, again, no to the overhead, and frankly, this is one of the businesses that did it better. But that's the overhead. So I have a yes here where it follows.
Yep.
That's the low level, and then these are two examples of solar options. So this one shows on a pole, but the element itself can be attached to anything. So like I think that could easily be if we had an allowance for say like one or two of these. That was discussed before with the example of Smash Burger, and again we could integrate that into a shop drawing to do something like this. This one is pretty bright. This was one of the an article recommended product. It's still available like on Amazon, so easy to access. $65 for that item. These ones that are not as bright, maybe a little more aesthetically interesting for a patio, again require no cords. The pair is $50. I'm sure there's a lot of other options. The really kind of number one point is, it seems to me that we can require solar. That's a pretty cost reasonable item
Oh,
for lighting.
And they have the post cap ones that actually give out good light. And I think the only thing we need to say is that lighting should be in compliance with the design guidelines for downtown.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In other words, that diagonal one's a good solution, but it's a modern design.
Yeah.
And
So.
we wouldn't let them put that on the building if the patio wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. So would you be favorable to an item like this as a right now the guidelines don't include that, but I could include that image, which I think is helpful for people just to see this as well.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of things you can put on top, just right on top of the post. They're
Yeah.
solar, so you'd have them all the way around.
And would you mind forwarding that to me if you?
That I can do.
If you're capable.
Now,
Well,
it's,
and then
Lightfoot J at
At
something.
Sand
Okay.
Measurement, yeah.
I'll send it to you.
so on that modern style, blade style light, do we want to put that under a discouraged?
That would be a way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we've done that, I think,
I did that.
There's a
Yeah.
whole discouraged.
somewhere else in the document,
Yeah.
so.
So I can add that to that.
One of my comments as a preview to the document is it says discouraged items. Do we want to change it to prohibited?
Oh, okay.
But we'll talk about
I
that.
include that as a slide, so we'll get to that. So then on the shade and heating, I know that there's a preference for shorter elements, like this one would be fantastic. Conveniently, they Photoshop out the cord. So all of, the electrical ones are going to have the direct power source. There's not, like a
That's an
solar.
electric.
This is electric, and it does have a cord. They just removed the imagery
Yeah.
of the cord.
Fancy that.
'Cause
Although
wanted-
they can do it under the deck, but once you get to the sidewalk, where are you going to get your power?
That's a challenge, and I don't think that our power source is going to be effective for the heaters. We have a hard time doing any lighting, let alone getting to heaters.
I also ran across some of the column ones, a little better design than that one there, that are also lit,
Oh, interesting.
or
Okay.
they're also a lighting,
Light source.
and
Illuminated.
yeah. No, I don't know, I'm not online.
So
But illuminated outdoor heater.
under heating in here, we talked about. What page that's on? Let's see here.
No, I'm drawing down.
Shade and heat. Low height infrared heaters are strongly preferred. Does that mean electric?
It does, yeah. So, and to be fair, this was completed, and then I did some additional hunting online at shopping, etc., to see can I find something that would have a battery pack, and I just didn't find anything that was
Okay.
widely available.
And it says portable propane heaters over 6 feet tall are acceptable, but a business may not use more than 2 in any park. Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking, well, most of them are kind of high.
They're about
and the heat
7.5
comes
feet.
down,
Yeah.
which doesn't seem like you want it right in your face.
Mm-hmm.
But okay.
So does that, leaving it as or transitioning that, I'd remove the section about the electric infrared heaters and return to maximum of 2 space heaters, 2 propane space heaters.
This is not a good example, but that's one
Okay.
that shows that they illuminate, but they have the ones with the propane bottle on the bottom.
Okay.
So they are out there.
That include illumination and heating.
Mm-hmm.
Is there why maximum of 2?
So that goes back to the initial Smashburger conversation where they had the 2 on either end, and
Okay.
it seemed like there was a preference to keep it to that or minimize it. The ones that are shown here, I think, are some of the nicest ones that we had on the street. A lot of them were the typical hooded that are less aesthetically
The
interesting.
Costco heaters.
The Costco heaters, and so there was 2 was mentioned in the last meeting.
Okay.
So I was just replicating that
I
comment.
can't think that businesses actually want space heaters per se, because they're inherently a liability. And so they use them because they need them.
Mhm.
And I would really, with an economic development mindset, I'd rather find an option where they can provide as many space heaters as would keep
We're only looking at 16 seats,
Right, well, I'm just saying,
so that's,
if 2 space heaters next winter means that nobody's out there, I think it might be in the city's best interest to look at options where we're not limiting the number of space heaters.
we can say the minimum number will have a discretion, because with 16 seats, if they're 4-person tables, that's 4 tables.
Yeah, I've had many dinners with people who
And-
have to be right
Under the
next to
thing,
Oh, yeah.
right.
you know, and so if this is if we're limiting it because of aesthetic concerns, I'd really like to exhaust the search of less aesthetically impacting space heaters, so that that's not the consideration. Because the driver here is making customers feel comfortable sitting outside, and I think it's in our best interest to ensure that these are used as year-round as possible while they're allowed.
Mm-hmm.
While they're allowed.
Yeah, I agree.
Preferably 2 then, but
But leave that open.
leave it open, because, you know, when they were forced to feed the people outside, but that's not the case anymore. They'll still have their full dining inside, unless something happens between now and then.
Yeah.
You know, if they can only use 8 of the, or 12 of the 16, they're still in the good.
Yeah.
Hey Bart,
Mhm.
did I miss something? Where does it say max 16? Or
It's in here.
I must have missed that. So I didn't
Uh,
catch that.
Eligibility, because that even complies with our outdoor dining ordinance. Dimensions.
I mean, I'm not thinking you made it up.
No. Did you have that number in there, Jonathan?
I don't recall offhand what
I
that
thought we
would have been.
did,
Maybe you were thinking of it just from the outdoor dining ordinance.
because when we get to
Well, on that topic, is that, regardless, because obviously there's multiple things for me to clean up, is that a specific threshold that we want?
for me, it's going to be a real battle coordinating this now with the downtown parking study. And we've been giving way, I mean, it's going to be a real battle at the commission level to justify giving free additional seating and eliminating parking. When the downtown parking study says there are days that currently the diagonal parking is at 100%.
Mm-hmm.
90% is what they consider 100%. And there are days that occurs, and we're eliminating a third of that and increasing the occupancy. So that means the temporary, quick in and out people who are going to the retail stores aren't going to have parking, period.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody in their 70s, who's not as mobile as I, they will stop using downtown to go shopping, period. They just, and they're not going to ride the trolley because you're going in for a quick stop. So I was thinking the 16 seems to be a reasonable number, and the El Ranchito gentleman who was here was very comfortable with that. He said 16 was just fine.
Yeah, I think
at a last meeting.
yeah, I can see some competing interests here, but now that you're talking about parking and not to get too deep into this, yeah, clearly the next downtown parking study will need to take into consideration a few things. One, what we're doing here, but I think this might be a good opportunity to start looking at how alternative forms of transportation are starting to affect downtown. As an example, Lyft now I think is starting to change the ability to use that area, the rides sharing services, I should say. So we can, and clearly this is an economic development impacted issue area. Jonathan and I will get together and start looking at this as we start.
I mean, I see we're giving a benefit to the restaurant owners, at a little benefit to the retail. But if we give too much benefit to the restaurant owners, we're definitely hurting the retail. And the last thing we want to see happen is for retail to leave downtown Del Mar. We've got to make it good where it thrives as a retail as well as just restaurant row.
I will, one quick comment on that. I know that we, and this is normal in City Life, hear people who, or comments from retailers who are not thrilled with the parking that does exist. I would say that my experience from walking and interacting with the retailers is that group would be a minority. I did have a couple of retailers that went so far as to say, we would prefer that the entire street shut down the way that the city initially talked about, a promenade style.
If there was parking somewhere else.
Sure, but I think the thought of that, what the coming from them was that we've seen such a big increase in foot traffic that we see value to there being long-term changes to Del Mar. Though I'm not advocating for the.
I've stopped shopping down there because it takes if you want to go down to Hobie and get a gift certificate, and you want to go in the afternoon, forget it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be parking in one of the lots if you can find one, and then having to hoof it. I'm certainly not going to ride the trolley. I'm going to go do it at
An alternate
Ralph's
site.
and get a gift card or whatever.
One thing you mentioned that I think could be an incorporation too for the temporary duration. We've done temporary signage in different ways. We did temporary curbside pickup, no parking. We did limited or 20-minute parking only when we shifted postal service time limited parking. You mentioned the seniors. I think that could be also like a good recommendation out of design reviews to incorporate a few spots that were senior, or like I've also seen at grocery stores like pregnant mothers, or thinking of something that way that gives still like a couple of spaces consideration to groups that have a harder time walking further.
So we're impacting even more the parking on Del Mar, which, you know, we are talking limited, and since they're not losing any parking or any seating in their restaurant, 16 is my number, because I tried to figure out how can we justify this to a retail store who had to buy shared parking from an adjacent lot and are spending money on a monthly basis, who's not getting any refund for that, and giving the restaurants all this benefit. And then there's some that flat out don't meet their parking, and they're having an impact on the Del Mar parking. And you're going to maybe increase their occupancy.
So why don't we do this?
It's a tough balance, but we're going to do that at the Planning Commission.
Well, yeah, but this is the feedback that we want. You know, we're taking away parking, and you know, typically it's the Public Works, Transportation, Engineering that would come to the Planning Commission and say, hey, we want to remove parking, and then they get that approval. That clearly, this is a unique project because we're approving design standards, and we're also allowing the continued non-use of existing parking spaces. So we'll talk with engineering, get some feedback on what types of information we want to provide to the Planning Commission, so that all of these considerations are on the table when.
And the other thing, we haven't talked about size of restaurants. I mean, if it's 35 seats or less, would normally be only allowed 8 outdoor seats, or be granted parking waivers to have 8 outdoor seats on their property. Now we're taking away some,
Absolutely.
so the smaller ones should only,
It's an issue of equity.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the next slide. So here's that encouraged versus discouraged. And any changes? I mean, you mentioned, so first consideration would be, do we want to call that prohibited as opposed to discouraged?
It means the same thing to me, so.
I guess
And-
what we did talk about in the first meeting, that certain cases would come back to design review. So maybe what I would say is, if we have requests that incorporate some form of element from the discouraged list, the response would be, we can't approve that at a staff level. That if you want staff approval of your request, it needs to be only encouraged elements. If you have, for some reason, a consideration that you want to use discouraged elements, that would come back for design consideration.
Yeah, because they may come up with a really unique way of doing one of those things that if we change the word to prohibited, that maybe we consider that, we haven't even anticipated. So I think the discouraged may be a good way of going. Although banners and signs, that's already ordinanced out. Yeah, I'm comfortable. How about you?
I'm fine.
Scott?
Good with that? Okay.
I like the idea of, use of discouraged items must be approved by planning commission.
Yeah. Yep, raising that beyond staff. Adam, did you have a?
No, I agree with Commissioner McCann entirely. Discouraged only applies to discretionary items.
Yeah.
There's no enforceability for staff to arbitrarily encourage or discourage.
Yeah.
So there should be a hook. And I
Yeah.
like that.
And that hook is, if you really want a specific element or design and you feel strongly about it, you're welcome to go to design
Go through the
review
process,
and argue for
and
that.
that's the deterrent.
So that's it for this presentation. So I guess I just open it up to any other general thoughts.
I think they're going in the right direction.
Okay.
But I do want to see you at the next level, because nobody other than myself on the commission has been through the downtown parking study. And the Downtown Business Association said 42 spaces is what we can cover up. That doesn't pencil. I mean, there's going to have to be some way to justify it, or we're throwing this out and everything we've previously done for every other applicant, every conditional use permit, and all down in that area
Yeah.
that's based on this, and saying, well, we were just kidding. So I think we need to say,
have some references to that or
if the
address
city council
that.
says, on an emergency basis only, we're going to disregard it, they can certainly do that. But I don't know if the emergency for the planning department or planning commission is there to justify throwing it out.
Yeah. So we're, speaking of planning commission, so staff's anticipating this going to the planning commission, full planning commission next. If they're, this is a weighty document, because it's in a public hearing setting and there's schedules and noticing. Staff would love to have this vetted appropriately beforehand and discussed heartily at the planning commission so that a decision can be made soon thereafter. Typically, it'd be nice if we can get this distributed, maybe out to the public, stakeholders, so everybody has a bit more time than normal to review it. But if there's any other thoughts that some additional review might be nice. Do you have a date of when you anticipate, Jonathan, taking this to the planning commission?
My inclination was to go the first meeting of February, but I am open on that. The cutoff for me at council is, I believe that's on March 15th, is the second meeting in March, and that's when they wanted that to return. So we would have, there's potentially 3 planning commission meetings before that, but if we are spilling into like March 2nd, for instance, with planning commission, that does put a pretty tight timeline to turn around any final changes and publish that out for the council.
What I'm wondering, maybe just a primer at a planning commission meeting.
Do we
Not
have
a discussion, but maybe
like a
study session.
We call it new business if we
A
want.
presentation maybe at the very
Presentation.
beginning, where
Do
you
we
just
have a planner
run
that's
through everything so that it's
versed
on
in
everything.
this already? I think they're all gone.
No, Kyle and Chris are, actually Kyle was one of the primary producers
On the
of
last, on the
of this.
19, this is
Yeah, the most recent version.
okay, or Chris or whoever.
Yep, Kyle or Chris.
They'd be already prepared and wouldn't have to re-educate themselves, and maybe a presentation and a little history of it would be a good way to go. Just because this was presented, so there's probably a PowerPoint already for this
Yeah.
somewhere.
I'm just thinking, giving a larger document to planning commissioners and saying, read this and then be prepared to discuss it is different than walking them through the presentation and then saying, now read it. It's already, it gets the creative juices flowing. I'll
They
say.
know what they're looking for too.
Right, and I just think there's a lot here.
Yeah.
There's a lot here. And as we've discussed tonight, there's considerations on many levels outside of aesthetics that need to be
Oh, yeah.
considered. So I want to do the things once and have
So-
it be good.
So if we could
first
get it
time.
as a presentation to everybody, because
Yeah.
they're going to have to know at some point, because taking parking down at the Pier Bowl, there's very little retail. It's pretty much all restaurants, so they're only impacting themselves. But up on Del Mar, it's definitely impacting all businesses.
So one option could be, when was your thought of primer introducing the thought of this to them before they have a full?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, this is only a week away to the next.
And I didn't know if that would be ready for that meeting.
Commission. Yeah, that would be tough to.
If not, I can think of some other options that we might.
I'd say this is important that we'd call a special meeting if we
Okay.
had to.
Let's see.
Just so
I'm
we
gonna
stay
be,
on-
yeah,
on
I'm
track.
going to be out on the last week of the month. You know what? Jonathan and I will talk offline. We'll figure this out this week, and then coordinate schedules with the planning commission.
Ensure that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I think that thanks for your feedback on this, and if you wouldn't mind sending me those examples that you had, if there was anything else, because I think one thing that will be helpful with the guidelines is incorporating some of those images so that people see like this is what we're looking for.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'll try to do that as much as possible.
So I do have a few other comments
Yes,
and
of course.
questions. So it says a maximum of 14 businesses. Is that first come, first serve? How does 14 businesses determined?
The Downtown Business Association gal came up with that number.
Okay.
It was also referring to so that the amount that had been used in the past. So if every business used 3 spaces, then that puts us at 42 spaces.
Okay.
So that was the maximum. We didn't have 14 on Del Mar in the past. There was a couple that used more than 3 spaces. So that would still give us anyone that participated in the past would have the bandwidth. I don't anticipate that being an issue. That probably would be something good though to include at planning when we get to planning commission if there is a specific preference, if that is by size of restaurant or some other metric.
Okay. I know you said that the 16 seats that El Ranchito was okay with it. Let's assume 4 tables, right?
4, or they have 2 4s and a number of 2 highboys and,
Right.
some
seaters.
combination thereof.
Right. If we're giving someone three parking spaces, which are nominally 8 feet wide by
Yep.
14 feet, I mean it certainly seems like there's a little more capacity in there than 4
Oh.
tables.
There is, and that's a problem. Because that's meaning, where are the people gonna park to use those? That's putting more parking load we don't have. The more density, we haven't gone through a case yet where we've had the restaurants with full seating, outdoor seating, and a summer.
Right.
We only saw 50% seating in the restaurant and then the outdoor seating. So it was almost the same as theoretically.
The same number of diners.
Right, and that's not the case this time. We've got a lot more diners.
Okay.
And I don't think the state's got the stomach right now, since they all own restaurants, to limit the seating in restaurants again. And I mean, like El Ranchito, he's loving this because he's got the back dining, which is 16 seats he doesn't have parking for.
Okay.
And now he could have another 16 seats out front that he doesn't have parking for. I mean, talk about a boom.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been down there plenty of times, and you might just have to park another half a block away.
Well, you've been lucky. During the summer, high season, good weather, it's impossible. Especially if you take out 47 something stalls. And those are the ones that are most accessible to any of these stores. I mean, if we were losing ones in the parking lots behind, oh, that's one thing, but we're taking them away.
Got it. Okay. Well, I guess I wonder if then, if we got 4 tables at 3 spots, maybe we just need to allow 2 spots to be gone, because they could get 4 tables.
I think there's a good argument for that, absolutely.
Is that
I mean, I was looking at where if we use 3 spots, we might be able to have a 90-degree angle rather than following that diagonal, which would open things up for bike rack or electric bikes. But I don't know if we have time to get into that or not.
Yeah,
I mean,
we
we
don't
can-
follow the parking space.
Yeah, we could
perfectly.
kind of, I think, tweak this a little bit as people are starting to make, I hate to do that, but when you're rushed, sometimes you got to. I had done sketches on that. What was it? Oh, yeah. Just thinking, I mean, doing something. Okay, so maybe you do go square, and then these areas are open. We've used 3 stalls. They're getting the area of 2, but that certainly opens things up for, as this guy swings in, protecting. I think you've got a 2-foot gap.
side buffer, yeah.
Side buffer. So somebody could propose that. So I mean, we got, and the one pot out here really does protect the guy turning in from going wide and hitting the wall. Because he comes out, he's going to want to start turning his wheels so the front of that car could be swinging into this area, so maybe that does come over here. But think about that a little bit, and I will too.
Yeah. You mind if I,
That's why I think some good input from
Pat?
Pat that's landscape architect,
Right.
would be helpful.
Okay. Under approved materials, the 3 side perimeter barriers should be constructed with wood, polywood, or dark iron pickets. By polywood, you mean like Trex type stuff. You didn't intend to say plywood.
No, not plywood. So polywood is commonly used for like
Man-made
public
product.
benches, etc. That like kind of it's a plastic
It's
wood
like track parking,
composite.
any of
Yeah,
them.
Okay, got it.
like track down.
Okay, I thought it was a typo.
I'll add the other language to clarify
Okay.
that.
A maximum of 3 umbrellas. That was just the desire to keep stuff uncluttered.
Really within the space, if they've got a 6-foot umbrella, that's about all you're gonna get on there. Because they don't put them in the middle of the table, they're putting them between tables,
Right,
and that's about all you're gonna get on there.
okay. Okay. And maybe someone can explain this sentence to me. On page 10, under OCFA requirements, it says, a method of controlling parked cars shall be maintained to keep a 20-foot clearance from the exterior patios. The 4th bullet point.
What page?
Yeah,
Page 10.
I recall this
Yeah.
one.
I don't know what that means. Like we're having parking spaces right next to the
I know. Yeah, I think we'll remove that. So some of this is language that was in our initial. So these last 2 pages of OCFA pollution prevention, I carried over from our initial, and I just used the language that OCFA sent to us.
Okay.
I'll discuss that with them because I agree that
I don't even know what that means.
it seems prohibitive of what we're doing. I agree with you.
But they do have the access directly sideways to it, and, I mean, it's not a fire danger. But they can pull up right in the middle of the road,
Right.
and they're there.
Yeah.
So I think that ought to work. Okay, I've got to
I get what you're saying.
get rolling here pretty quick.
Okay, well, that's my
That
comments.
is it?
How would I get a copy, or it sounds like we're gonna get distributed a copy of that downtown parking study?
Yeah, there's.
I'll tell you what, I printed this one out.
Well, I don't wanna
I
take
can-
yours.
I can
Is it
part with
online?
Yeah, it's online.
Okay, I'll find it. That's all my comments.
They last for a couple months.
And that thing was a real hot issue. You know, this is what people have looked at to look at building parking structures and acquiring private property for lots and everything because they want to keep that downtown vital. And with going to our, if we really impact parking too much, it's going to make our mixed-use products possibly less desirable.
It's functional.
And
I did take a look recently at just a concluding thought for a long term. Laguna Beach just had their downtown specific plan approved, and they reduced parking requirements kind of across the board in that area. Not a popular thing generally with the Coastal Commission, so they had to justify that. So that's part of what I was looking at. Is like, what are the different ways
they've
that
got
they're...
that parking structure.
So that's
downtown.
one part is that they've emphasized lots and structures in their case kind of on the outside of town. Part 2 is annual trolley. Their trolley now operates year round, and they also implemented an app solution. I don't know how widely that's used, but that was part of the justification where they do have sensors at some of the highest use parking areas. So you can go to the app and see, like, is there any space available at this lot versus that lot? So that's something that we can look at moving forward too, where that's, the Coastal Commission considered this, because there's a direct connection of them wanting to, for instance, Forest Avenue, remove some parking supply long term, and then in other cases reduce parking demand. So how are you justifying improving mobility to offset those changes? So,
And I think we are looking at this as only through 2023.
yeah.
So we know it's gonna daylight and go away, but if somebody does wanna do it permanently, this is what's gotta be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then do we widen the sidewalks? And allow it to be on the sidewalk with the pedestrian traffic away from the building, because the liquor thing's daylight too. The state
Yeah.
loosening
Allowance
requirements there.
And just so the commission's aware, commission members, even though this is planned at daylight, staff is aware that there's nothing more permanent than a temporary use. So we're
That's
looking
my
at this-
concern.
Yeah, like it might daylight or sunset, I should say, but we're looking at this as if it were to be a long-term benefit to the community, what's the best product that we can help the commission approve?
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and it's a possibility. Then that's why I don't like. If we were to design it from scratch, it would be totally different. And for a permanent solution, that's really the way it should be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you're hoping that those restaurants are going to be always restaurants. We don't even know that. We can't count on that. Okay.
I move adjournment.
If you wouldn't mind just going through the rest of the agenda, there was
Sure.
a public comment section, and I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Even though there's nobody here.
We have concluded old business. We have oral and written communications. Do we have any oral and written communications?
We have none for this meeting.
And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move adjournment.
I second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
And ayes. It's unanimous. Commissioner McCann and Commissioner Crandall are aye. So, meeting adjourned.
Great.